one law is lethal to the lies of leftism. Two laws is an intellectual downpouring of Agent Orange. And now your host, Rob Lawley.
And I decided I'm going to start dressing in clothing that's like real classy and a little bit timely like men used to do, and then also just try to give that a shot of adrenaline in the arm by way of just fashion and outlook, because I think when you dress a certain way, then you start acting a certain way. What's interesting about this is I started thinking about this, what are some ways we can permeate our culture, and what are some ways we can kind of affect it, and yet, the notion of wanting to be cool is never going to go away. People are always going to want that. So this kind of tightropes those two things. You got the classy garb and then the classy attitude and then the classy thinking, but it also can be perceived as cool and retro. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I think that's an interesting thing. So
That's interesting that you brought that up, because when I watched this movie, it was called Looper. The thing that I thought this movie did better than any time travel, time reference movie was the fashion. Instead of thinking to themselves, what we're going to do is we're going to make this crazy fashion that no one's ever seen, and this is going to be the fashion of the future, like Back to the Future, or like countless other movies have done. They've tried to go so extreme in the future. Yeah. But what would actually happen, if you were talking 40, 50 years in the future, you would probably have people dressed like people dressed in the 20s or the 70s, because everything was fixable. Right. So what they did is they had the people 40, 50 years in the future dressed like the people in the 90s. Yeah. And I thought that was genius. And then when they went an additional 40 or 30 years into the future from that, the in thing was these guys all dressed like they were Amish with these big hats and the coats. And I thought, this person has an attention to detail, and this person that did the art direction and costume design for this movie is absolutely a forward-thinking person.
I love that, yeah. I did see that movie. I saw that movie, but I didn't pick up on all that subtlety, but that's really cool. I mean, I did pick up on the fact that they were doing, like, the jumps around with the fashion, but I didn't connect the dots. That's really cool. It's so fun. It's so cool how they use the fashion artist to be a real player in the movie and a real, like, artist.
Yeah, it was a big, they even make mention of it. And Jeff Daniels, who plays a guy who's from the future, he goes, don't you realize that you got these guys from this time period, and they were copying people from this time period? Basically, I think what you're doing is exactly what you would need to do in order to set maybe like, not a trend, but like a mindset would be just do something completely different that's not even on the horizon, which would be classic. People dressing like they're used to, really nice, and taking the way they look seriously, which I kind of liked about other cultures that they do that. I mean, maybe they're dressing in these big, epic costumes, but they still take that. It's still like, when I go to church, I wear a suit, because I'm paying respect. And they have that mindset of when I leave the house, I want to show that I take life seriously. And I think this.
I agree. I totally agree. Well said. I mean, the truth is that I find that, those values from that time, too, really resonate with me. Not all of them. You have to helicopter some out, but I really find, and also the mentality of the people, like, I'm down and out. Things aren't necessarily going my way, but I'm going to dress like I want things to be going my way. I'm going to take myself seriously. And also just men were men and women were women. That appeals to me, too. You had a contrast between the sexes. You had a lot of celebration of femininity. You had a celebration of masculinity. And like you said, it was nothing to see a leading man look 55 and look 55. And people took that seriously. It had a sense of debonair, accomplishment, possibly wealth, possibly situation. Certainly his mind was working.
Wisdom.
Yeah, his mind was working on a certain level. He was able to make classy jokes and connect different cultural things into humor and conversation. And, of course, that's the way life actually is. I mean, you meet a 20-year-old, and they're bankrupt. I mean, they're bankrupt every way you can be bankrupt as a human being, except their skin's tight. They have a lot of cockiness. Yeah. And I was like that. I mean, I'm not dogging them out. I'm just saying the truth is you want to sit down with a guy like 55, 60, light up a cigar, and you're going to learn something.
What relationships are now is, the young, attractive thing, you take from them what you want, which is you want to spend your time intimately with someone very attractive, and that you don't need to know if they're intellectual or funny, or you just got what you wanted from them. And so maybe that's why we put more stock in that now, because relationships are not anything more than that. So
they're not three-dimensional. That's true. That's an interesting point. They're not three-dimensional relationships. They're all cardinal. We've really, really reached a point where that's just become like super super on steroids in our culture. It's just like nothing.
And I do think that even still, even that being said, that a woman worth being around probably finds older men attractive, not because I'm getting older, but only because that they're more well-rounded in what they're attracted to. So a man who has worldly wisdom and is clever and, you know, who has a couple miles on him is probably a woman who's attractive is probably more worth being interested in as a person anyway.
You know, men have always had it a little bit easier as we age. I mean, that's a timeless thing as well. That was true in the 50s as it is now. But also, you know, with a woman, you know, clearly the physicality, I think, slips. She's got that femininity going on with the Clash. She's got that, you know, allure going on. It's almost like that.
Well, there's no question that you can be attracted to a person at any age. Them looking their age, them acting their age. You can be attracted to a person at any age. And I guess the trick is really the thing that people right now, they lie to themselves about is I got to look 20 for the rest of my life, and that's the plastic surgery, which I'm not against, but I'm against trying to look 20 for the rest of your life. I'm not against trying to look awesome 30 and awesome 40 and awesome 50.
Right.
I'm against you spending time, effort, and money trying to look 20 when you cannot.
Exactly. You can that's always the fatal flaw, right? Because I mean, I know that one of the comedians, Adam Carolla, one of his best bits, in my opinion, is when he says, "Look, the trick is that if you're a woman and you get surgery, the problem with these Hollywood people is they never throw in a little reel. Like, if you're going to get, you're not 75 with a full black head of hair. You got to be 75 with like a little gray on the sides, just classing it up. But then you can do a little dye in there and people will buy it. But if you're like Jerry Lee Lewis, midnight black hair at like 80, you know, nobody's buying that. And the same thing's true of a woman. If you just get some touch up, if you just do this or that and just a little of that and a little of this, it'll all pan out much, much better for you.
And you're fighting an uphill, not even an uphill battle. You're swimming in the middle of the ocean with a huge weight tied around your legs. You're never going to win this battle. Everyone from the dawn of time has aged and died. The best thing you can do is do it gracefully, do it with some self-respect, and don't wish for the yesteryears, because that's the dumbest thing you could possibly do, because there's no way of getting them back. But you can make every season special.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
I mean, again, easier for a man, far easier. You keep it tight. You try to make yourself look your best. You are going to be fine. Different for a woman, probably different technique,
but
understanding for a woman.
But still possible, though. You know, I mean, like exactly.
I think it's possible for a woman to do it within the confines of a relationship, a loving relationship. It is not possible for a woman to attract a man that you cannot. When women are between 16 and 23, they attract. Maybe not like, maybe a man would never cross the line and say or do something, but they attract every man. That's just the nature of the beast. But after 24, you start going downhill, and that's why, in my opinion, you probably got the gift of beauty and youth, so you could reel one in. That's the trick. Being played on you now is that you want to act like a guy and be a swinger. But, the thing that I see on a regular basis, which is really sad to me, is I see these 30-year-old, 35-year-old women still out there hitting it hard. And I can see that the men do not respond to these women, even remotely, as they probably once did. I don't know this because I didn't know them, but I can see that they're still attractive women, but they're dried up. And so they keep putting on airs as though there's these young, beautiful flowers, when in actuality, where they should be at in life is they should have one guy who's just devoted to them and loves them and kind of is there with them as they fizzle out.
The biblical model is always looking out for you. You know how the Bible talks about different cultural eras, say how it was speaking to the Israelite culture and how it was accounting for it. Now it gets, people use this against the Bible. They talk about slavery. They talk about, relationship with women and all these different things and how they pull these things out without any historical or biblical context. But the Bible was actually trying to deal with a fallen world and trying to give all these people like the best case scenario inside of that fallen world and account for the cultural things, etc. Well, the same thing can be said here. It's looking at, unfortunately, men and women, especially men, have this physicality, desire, and it's trying to set up a system that really, really accounts for that and allows grace in aging and allows security and love and edification, and it's a cool thing if you look at it like that.
Fields a devil bait and switch is he promises you one thing, and in actuality, you're so busy staring at this thing that you want so bad that you're not noticing all the other things you're losing. You know, and to touch on what you said earlier, it's when people say that the Bible condones slavery and the Bible condones, you know, men mistreating women. That's someone who doesn't read the Bible and worse, doesn't understand it, because basically what all that talks about is God's the same, but all things being equal, it would look a lot different, but the world's not equal. So if you're a believer and you're in this situation, or you're a godly person and you're in that situation, this is the way you deal with it. The world's not fair, and the world's not fair because we're all here and we all suck for all intents and purposes. So this is how you deal with the situation you're in. You know, slaves obey your master, wives obey your husband. This is not saying God doesn't love you, or God doesn't think you're equal, or God's condoning. This is the situation you're in because of a fallen world. This is how you best get along in the situation.
Absolutely.